Hi, it's Jerry Roberts back again with today we have the Newsmakers TV reunion tour coffee clatch edition, and we're welcoming back a couple of old friends that we haven't seen even before there was a pandemic. Laura Capps, president of the Santa Barbara School Board. Welcome, Laura.
Hey, thanks.
And Dale Francisco, former city councilman and conservative thought leader. Dale, thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here.
And of course, our friend Josh Molina. So happy Juneteenth to you all, the celebration of the Union Army reaching Galveston, Texas in 1865 and freeing slaves, or telling them that they had been freed since the emancipation. We're going to talk about that in a little while, but I want to start with the breaking news of the week, which is George Buell, the head of the community development department, resigned. And Josh, you scooped the world by 6 or 7 minutes on that one. What happened? Why did it happen now?
Well, as we've talked about, Paul Casey's been under a lot of pressure to do something about the community development department. And for a long time, he was comfortable with that pressure. But what we've seen recently are council members who were putting him on the spot and saying, hey, Paul, if you don't do something about community development, then maybe we should do something about you, because we know that the council does not manage employees other than the city attorney and the city administrator. So Paul, feeling that pressure in more ways than one from more than just one person, and knowing that people in the business community have lines to the council members, they're being more influential. Paul and George had to work something out, as I understand it. And so I don't think George was going to retire at this time, but he actually did retire. He announced that he's resigning. So he said that he's going to get a job somewhere else with a undisclosed developer. So we'll see what that is, but it's happening now because Paul is trying to save his job. And the only way he can do that is by taking action in the community development department.
Yeah, Dale, that's not a new problem in the community development department. I mean, this dates back decades, right? I mean, back when you were on the council, there were issues.
Certainly when I was on council, and as far as I know, Paul Casey's entire tenure at community development, the complaints have not really changed. And then a further 6 years of George Buell, and we'd get periodic comments from Paul and from others that things were changing and they were getting better, but nobody seems to see that.
Well, one thing that didn't happen, and Laura, I'm curious about your take on this, is that you didn't have individual council members sort of coming out publicly and saying, if you don't fire George Buell, we will, and mentioning people's names. I mean, when you went on the school board, I assume that they gave you some instruction that probably not best to mention people by name in public settings, about particularly when you don't even have the power to fire them. Were you surprised by that a couple of members came right out on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the trickiest things is to be in an elected position and the personnel issues, and you can't talk about them technically, or the council tells you you can't talk about it, but yet everybody's talking about it. And in this case, there's grand jury and there's reports and there's consultants. So I can feel that tension of, going back to other challenges we've had at the school board that I don't need to get into, but where, then we're constrained. So, I mean, I find it refreshing. I'll say that they've been so vocal and specific and not sort of dancing around the, challenges that everybody sort of knows are there, right?
Yeah. Josh, what's going to change?
Well, we don't know. I mean, that's the big question. I don't know that everybody on the council who's been unhappy with community development necessarily agrees that George was the problem. I think they believe that Paul is also an issue. And I know that the business community will not stop here. I think that their ultimate goal is the city administrator. So what's going to happen now, we're going to have to wait and see to sort of see what the reaction is. It's going to be interesting to see who Paul Casey picks to replace George. I think that will be a statement in terms of whether people are going to relax. It isn't as though the business community is only unhappy with George Buell. There's other people in the department and there's other people in the city. So how Paul handles the resignation and who he puts in there is going to make an impact. I think there's probably a faction on the council that will not rest until there are further changes, whether that's Paul or someone else. But I think that they're very determined to make an impact here.
Dale, what would need to change in the community development department to, I mean, you know, we've got these permit problems and
Right.
the building department and people, you know, dragging their heels, and you have to go to 32 places instead of one. I mean, how should it change? What should be the improvement?
Well, the first thing that's going to happen is Paul Casey is going to have to pick a search committee, and it will be important who's on that search committee, and it will be important what their focus is. And I think the focus needs to be finding someone who has experience turning departments like this around. It's not an easy job. If it were easy, Paul would have done it when he was on board. George would have done it. There are obstacles besides top management, but top management they have to be the leaders on this, and they have to have had, I think, experience in turning around a troubled department.
All right. Well, speaking of search committees, we had Hilda Maldonado in town, or at least in an undisclosed location, giving Zoom interviews this week, Laura, the
Yeah.
new superintendent of schools. What was she here for? Was it for get acquainted, or was she finding the place, or just getting caught up?
All of the above. Yeah, we got to meet her in person. I'm glad you and
That's
Josh.
right. You never had met her. That's
Yeah, I know. Behind the mask, of course. But yeah, she's just getting going. She was meeting with, she met with all the principals. She's met with some senior team members. She spoke with both of you. Good articles there, good interviews, and she's just getting going. So she'll be looking for a place to live, which is no small feat here in this town. So she'll be back officially starting July 1st.
July 1st, she'll be back.
Mm-hmm.
And now, is she going to bring a part of a new team with her, or is this who she's got, the principals and the administrators?
Oh yeah, I mean, certainly she'll have hiring authority however she sees fit, but we've got a full team now. There's one potential opening with the departure of Dr. Ramirez, but I'm not sure, you know, that's up to her as to how to fill that or reconfigure, and that's her job. That's not my job. So but I'm excited that she's coming.
Would you like to list some people who you think should be canned here now?
well, Jerry, you seem to know a lot about the school board. Maybe you're Jerry
I have some thoughts, believe me.
Jerry in 2020, we've got some openings.
Josh, you talked to Hilda for 45 minutes. What was your takeaway I think, just to back up, Carrie Matsuoka, the outgoing superintendent, had some, I think, communications issues would be a kind way of putting it. And particularly in speaking with parents who don't necessarily agree with him or agreed on the direction that he was taking things. What was your sense of how she'll be able to deal with that? Will she be more effective?
It's too early to know. I didn't cover the school board when Carrie Matsuoka was hired, so I didn't go through this process with him where it was sort of an effort by the public relations person to introduce him to all the reporters. So I don't know. Clearly, right out of the gate, Hilda Maldonado seems to have much more of a effective style of communication, and certainly with reporters. So she she's open, she's kind, she's nice. She doesn't really talk a lot about herself. In fact, you kind of have to push her to talk about her story. So I think that a lot has to be we have to wait and see. I have a Santa Barbara bias in the sense of, I really think that no matter how educated you are, how smart you are, how good you are in other communities, that when you come into Santa Barbara, it's like this whole little world where you can't plan for it. You have no idea what you're going to experience on the ground in terms of the culture of the community, the character, and certainly the politics. So I don't know if she actually knows what it's going to be like. Obviously, all of us know what that's like when you have a room full of passionate parents and activists, and they're breathing down your neck, and they're making calls, and they're making accusations. I mean, I think we'll see at that moment what and how she handles that. Clearly, she's dealt with that in LA, and it's a much bigger scale, but still, it's very unique here. So I think that already she's off to a good start, and I think that people are going to probably give her a good first year before they start to judge her one way or the other.
Yeah. Dale, you talk to the James Finkners and the fair education people and the people sort of on the center right of these things. What do you think the most important thing that Hilda could do to sort of heal this ideological wound, if not necessarily in practice, but how could she go about addressing those concerns?
Jerry, I don't have a great deal of expertise here, but I would say to reach out to those parents. I think the most important thing would be showing an emphasis on education itself and moving away from some of the social justice issues. If she shows that her big concern is improving the knowledge and skills of the students, and that's what she's focused on, that would go a long way towards bringing some of those parents back on board.
Yeah, which is going to be kind of a challenge, Laura, in the moment that we're in. And I guess Monday night you had a long session with the students who had brought the demands that have been associated with Black Lives Matter. It wasn't necessarily Black Lives Matter, but the thing I'm curious about, as you remember, it was just a couple of years ago at San Marcos when parents were pleading to have a school safety officer.
Right.
San Marcos is the only high school. Now this group of students is asking that you do away with school safety officers. How are you going to thread the needle on that?
Yeah, I mean, their list of demands are powerful. We met with the students on Monday evening, and Hilda actually participated in that, just observed mostly, but it was good timing that she was there. And they're really well organized. Obviously, they pulled off a protest of a few thousand people. But it's interesting, of the 6 demands, one was to defund that student resource officer. Each of the high schools, they on their own changed that demand. I'm not sure how far out in the community that's gotten yet. Probably not very far out.
And now you're breaking news here.
Breaking news. They on their own accord checked in with their network, and I'm talking about these student leaders. They're calling themselves Black. They just gave themselves a name, Black Student Youth SB, and they checked in with their fellow students who said, actually, enough of us want to have the student resource officer on campus, so they've amended that demand to just beef up the implicit bias training and have there be more oversight. So that's actually what we're looking at. We're addressing each of the 6 demands at our meeting on Tuesday, and we're going to take action on all 6.
All right.
Can I say something, Jerry?
Go for it.
I think that Hilda Maldonado, just to go back to Dale Francisco's point, I think she's going to double down on the social justice stuff. I mean, I got the sense from her that she feels that's extremely important, and that she could have used a lot of that when she was going to school in LA. So I don't think that she's going to come in here and sort of tone that down for the sake of fair education. I think probably her goal is going to be to help fair education understand that whatever the curriculum is, that it's good for everybody, and that it helps those students be at a place where they can be able to learn at the same rate as maybe some other students. So I think that that's probably going to be the goal, is trying to get fair education to understand what the importance for those students of feeling safe before they even enter the classroom. So I don't know that she's going to be effective with that and knowing those groups, but I don't think she's going to pull back on any of that or not. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be just communities. I mean, if she wants to sort of work with them, certainly she could reopen that and sort of say, the next time this contract comes up, maybe we should look at a different kind of social justice advocacy. I don't know, but I think she's a big believer in helping students feel safe outside of the classroom as well as inside.
Yeah,
Go
thanks
ahead.
for saying that, Josh, because I also think that, I mean, I just don't think it's an either or. And that's what that's my position on the school board. It's like, it's not like you're pro academics or you're pro social and emotional learning and implicit bias training. I mean, why can't we do all of these things well? That's just that's my position, and that's my belief, and my faith in the system to be for teachers who want to do both. They actually want their students to succeed academically, but also have a strong background and support systems at home and in the school system. So,
Well, I guess I mean, you know, what the Faulkner people would say, or fair education people would say, is we're not doing the academics very well, just based on test scores and the achievement gap and so on and so forth. And so I think they do tend to look at it as a binary choice, particularly when they see these large contracts to just community and so on, and say, well, why aren't we spending that money on that?
large contract meaning, you know, again, we can revisit this, $200,000 a year out of a $160 million budget.
When is that contract up, by the way? Because I want to make a note to be at that meeting.
Jerry's going to
So-
submit his own bid for curriculum.
All right, so Dale, so basically month, we've really seen the aftermath of the George Floyd killing at the hands of white police officers in Minneapolis has dominated politics really across the nation, around the world to a certain extent, and certainly in Santa Barbara. And you have been somewhat critical of the way that you think the city council particularly has reacted to the demands that Black Lives Matter leaders have brought to it. What concerns you?
A couple of things concern me. The first is we need to look at what our situation is here with our police department. That should be city council's focus. And the article that I read, Tyler Hayden had an article in the Independent about use of force in Santa Barbara Police Department. It's a very, very, very small fraction of all the cases that come up. I don't think that's a huge issue in Santa Barbara. You know, somebody tell me different if it is. It certainly hasn't been in the news. And these kinds of, unfortunately, when you authorize people to use force, sometimes people are going to misuse it. And that's just reality. But all the reports that I've seen that have looked at police violence have said there's no racial component. There's no difference between how the police treat white people and how the police treat Black people.
Well, I would just say
incidents.
that the Washington Post has a database of
Right.
Every police killing, and the proportion of or as a percentage of population, I think Black people have been killed considerably at a considerably higher rate than white people. But to stay on the local piece of it,
The other issue for me is we've got not that long ago, the voters of this city passed Measure C, and one of the big promises of Measure C is we're going to build a new police station. And according to articles I've read in our local media, we now have people on council saying, well, I don't know, maybe we should revisit this, and I don't know, we should look at our options. To me, that's going back on a promise that city council made to the voters. And It's exactly, if you remember, what Frank Hotchkiss and Joe Armendariz predicted would happen if the voters passed this.
Yeah, John, what about that, Josh? You had a piece about the council meeting this week and what they did with the police budget. It was $2 million originally in there for the new police station, and they pulled it back.
Yeah, I think there was nothing, it was certainly implied in Measure C that the goal would be that the money would go toward infrastructure in a variety of ways. And so, but as Paul Casey will tell you, that it is, you know, they can move it around and do different things with it. But the goal is to pave the streets. It's to make infrastructure improvements. I think that we're at a point in time where we just have to bend the debate a little bit and have to look at it more than just, it's hard to explain in that, you know, if elected officials are elected to represent the people, well, then elected officials are going to have to listen. And we've had hours and hours of public comment, and we've heard from people. I don't know if they live in Santa Barbara or not, but they're taking the time to express their perspectives. We've had these marches. We've had students come out and talk about these things. And so I think Dale makes a lot of sense on paper. Like I totally get what he says. Like, it's totally logical the way that he's explaining it. But I also think that at this point in time, there's a lot more nuance, and there are a lot more elements that are going on. And I think the council is going to need to be creative, and they're going to need to change some things. They're going to need to figure out how to respond. I think to his point is, yes, you know, we have not had, thankfully, and hopefully we never will, a George Floyd incident. Okay. But I mean, on the ground, you know, in talking to people, just being a reporter, we're talking a lot about sort of implicit bias here. We're talking about, you know, the difference between a guy on a skateboard being hassled by the police versus, you know, a different kind of person walking down the street in baggy clothes or something. Like, there's an implicit bias that they're concerned about. And we're not talking about the extremes of the police brutality, but we're talking about people of color feeling as though they are interacted with by police far more than other people are. And I think that's sort of the culture shift that they're trying to make aware of. Obviously in Santa Barbara, we don't have those issues, but I don't think we want to wait till we have that issue until we do something. I think we want to be proactive, and I think the cops need to try to understand and not take it personally. That, I mean, every time journalists get bashed, you know, it's a real thing. It doesn't mean they're all bad. If cops feel criticized, they don't have to take it personally. It's important to listen and try to understand the argument.
Well, Josh has just accused you of not being nuanced. How do you respond? What do you think about what Josh said?
I think, based on my knowledge of the police department, I know a lot of police officers, and the ones I know went into this business because they want to protect people. That's really what they're about. And I think our department does a good job of training people in de-escalation, dealing with mentally ill, dealing with a lot of social problems that in the good old days, the police were not really meant to deal with. I think our department is good at that. And can they get better? Sure, I'm sure they can. I don't mind. I'm not against the idea of educating the police in how to deal with a lot of these real world problems. Of course, that's great. What I don't want to see is a sort of panicked reaction on city council that goes back on, I mean, Josh is right that it doesn't say it in the initiative, we're going to fund a police station.
That's what everybody voted for. That's what everybody voted for. That's what Randy Rouse was out there talking about every day. That's why he put his reputation behind it. Yeah, no, I think that'll be a big problem if they go back on that. Laura, just quickly, when Josh talks about listening, I mean, what has been your takeaway from listening to the many hours of testimony that you received at the school board? Unfortunately, you were able to be at home. So
I don't know if Zoom is better than.
Yeah. No, seriously. I mean, what did anything change your mind about anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like my mind was changed, but I'm certainly educated more. I mean, just to hear from students about the fact that so few of our teachers are teachers of color. We have an issue there. We should be doing better at recruiting more diverse teachers. It does not, our teacher population doesn't reflect our student population at all. And, you know, they talked about the real life implications of that. Like there's just real experiences that they're feeling. This isn't just about police brutality. It's about centuries of since slavery and all of the challenges and the dignity that's lacking. And I think that we all, even a progressive school board of 5 progressive women, we have a lot to learn. We have a lot that we could be pushing on. We should do more oversight of the student resource officers. We should be figuring out why these systemic problems don't get better year after year after year since when I went to school in this district and the way that it was semi-separate, right? So I'm listening a lot. I mean, and we're hearing from a lot. We've 500 emails. We had about 150 people speak at public comment. The emails keep coming. These students are on fire, and I'm supportive. I'm all behind what they're doing.
All right. Meanwhile, in the real world, we have a pandemic still going on. Laura, I know there's 3 options, and you're going to talk about the options, but is it 100% certain that school is going to resume with buildings on August 13th?
No, it's not. We are taking a vote on an option on the hybrid model and a schedule that's associated with that. I think that the odds of things changing, look what's just changed in the last few days here with our spikes numbers and a mask mandate. Meanwhile, then a parent just sent me that Marin County just said they're opening fully. So I think this is going to be fluid up until August 18th. But that being said, a lot of planning has to go into it. So I support the staff in moving forward towards a model that, knowing that we have to shift. And Hilda was pretty clear about the fact that, what did she say? No crystal ball. We just have to have.
Who's the decision maker? Is it the board or is it her?
As it should be, it's the staff makes a recommendation that the board then supports. But they're doing the legwork of figuring out how these models, and really the teachers are super involved. I tell parents who, most parents that write to the school board, they want fully open, or they want more, right? That tends to be what we're hearing. But it's the teachers who have to do the teaching, and they need to feel comfortable and they need to feel safe and healthy to be able to do it. So it's a combination, and our teachers union is right there in the mix of these conversations and making these recommendations. So it's really the teachers who are going to make, the staff and teachers are making a recommendation to the board, but I could see it changing a few times before we get to August 18th.
All right. I'm sorry, I misstated August 18th. So Dale, so we were going for a further reopening of commerce this week, and now the governor has put the brakes on Santa Barbara County, so Josh won't be able to get that face tattoo he's been looking forward to for all these many months. But do you think that the governor's still being overly cautious?
Well, I've thought that from the beginning, and I know that I have a lot of friends who are extremely concerned about COVID-19. Yes, it's a serious disease. Is it something that justified quarantining healthy people? I don't believe it did. I don't believe it did from the beginning. And obviously our numbers in California, even with the recent spike, are very, very small compared to the numbers in New York, let's say. So every place in this country is different. There's a lot we still don't understand about this disease, but what we do understand is that we've really punched a hole in California's economy. And that has costs associated with it as well.
Yeah. Josh, have you seen any numbers around City Hall yet about, how the economy, is it bouncing back at all or is it not?
Well, I just know from what they've reported in their budget, and those are the latest numbers of, something like a 12.5 deficit this year and a little bit smaller next fiscal year. I think that the hotels are really slow. I talked to a hotel owner yesterday for a story I did, and they said people just start traveling right now, so even though they can. So I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon. State Street's really busy and it's really popular. That's sort of interesting. I don't know what we're going to do with the schools. It's tough because I think all parents want their kids to go back to school because that's the best way they're going to get an education. However, you know, if this thing gets much worse, it's going to be a tough decision.
I don't see the economy coming back until the kids are able to go back to school. I just think that's such an
Right.
important threshold issue. Okay, well, thanks to Josh Molina and Dale Francisco and Laura Capps. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time on Newsmakers TV.